Ethan walked through the wide glass doors of the new Tech Life superstore. The place was bright, loud, and full of people who wanted the latest gadgets. Big neon signs flashed above the counters, showing the words, "Smart Pet, your perfect companion." Everywhere he looked, people were holding small colorful boxes shaped like glowing eggs. Each box was advertised as a pod that would open when the new owner touched it. Inside, the company promised, was the smartest pet on Earth. Ethan had never cared much about pets. He was not the kind of person who liked cats or dogs. He lived alone in his small apartment, working long hours at a data center. But something about the advertisement had caught his attention. The company said the pets could learn emotions, play games, and even talk. Like a robot mixed with a pet, Ethan thought, maybe it will keep me company when I get home tired. He walked down the aisle filled with stacked pods. Most of them glowed with soft blue or green light. Each pod had a sticker, Smart Pet version 7.2. Kids pointed and begged their parents to buy one. Teenagers laughed as they scanned the options with their phones, and salespeople in shiny silver uniforms shouted about discounts. Ethan looked at the price tag and sighed. It was not cheap, but he had saved some credits for something fun. He wanted a change in his life, something different. So he picked up a pod with blue light and held it in his hands. It felt warm, almost alive. He frowned but told himself it was just clever design. As he turned to leave, a salesman rushed over. The man was tall, with sharp eyes and a forced smile. "Looking for a smart pet, sir?" he asked, his voice too eager. "Yes, just this one," Ethan replied, but the salesman shook his head quickly. No, that one is boring," he said, glancing around nervously. "You want something special, yes?" Before Ethan could answer, the salesman bent down and pulled a dusty pod from under the shelf. It was darker than the others, glowing faint purple instead of blue or green. The box was scratched, and the sticker looked old. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Is this even new?" The salesman forced another smile. "Of course, sir. Very special edition, very rare." He pushed the box into Ethan's hands as if he wanted to get rid of it quickly. The pod felt heavier. Its glow pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. Ethan tilted his head. "Strange. Why is it different from the rest?" The salesman's smile weakened. "Prototype," he whispered, "but better, much better." Then he straightened, louder again. "Lucky customer. You take it today with discount." Ethan looked at the strange purple pod in his hands. Something inside him felt uneasy but also curious. He had always lived a boring, predictable life. Maybe this was his chance to try something unusual. "All right," he said finally. "I'll take it." The salesman almost sighed in relief. He scanned the code quickly, not even explaining the features like other staff did. He pushed the receipt into Ethan's hand and waved him toward the exit. "Enjoy your pet, sir, enjoy," the man said, but his eyes told a different story. There was something in his look. Fear, maybe, or guilt. But Ethan ignored it. He carried the pod out of the store, walking past excited families and laughing kids. Nobody paid attention to him or his strange glowing box. Outside, the night air was cool. Neon lights from the city reflected. On the pod's surface, it almost seemed to shimmer with life. Ethan placed it carefully in the passenger seat of his old hover car. As he drove home, he kept glancing at it. The light inside the pod grew stronger whenever he touched it. "Feels alive," he muttered, shaking his head. "Don't be stupid, Ethan, it's just a machine." But deep down, he could not shake the feeling that this pod was different. Too different, like something inside was waiting for him. And unlike the other customers, Ethan was not just buying a pet tonight. He was about to bring home something far more strange. Something that would change his life forever. Ethan carried the strange pod into his apartment. The door clicked shut behind him and silence filled the small room. His apartment was not much. Just a couch, a table, a bed, and too many empty coffee mugs. He placed the pod carefully on the table. Its purple glow lit the walls like a dim lamp. The hum inside the pod seemed louder now, like a soft vibration in the air. Ethan leaned closer, running his hand across the surface. It was warm, too warm for metal. As soon as his skin touched it, the glow flickered. The hum changed to a steady pulse, almost like a heartbeat. He stepped back quickly, staring at it. "This is not normal," he whispered. The pod responded. Lines of light appeared, forming strange patterns across its shell. Symbols, alien and unreadable, shifted across the surface, glowing brighter with every second. Ethan's heart raced. Okay, this is definitely not what I bought. He reached for his phone to record, but before he could press the button, the pod cracked. A hiss of air escaped, cold and sharp. The glow spread across the room, filling it with purple-white light. Ethan shielded his eyes. The pod split open down the middle with a sound like tearing metal. For a moment, the whole apartment trembled. Then, silence. When the light faded, Ethan lowered his arm. Inside the pod was not a robot pet, not a machine with glowing eyes and cute tricks. It was a small figure, curled up like a sleeping child. She looked human, almost. Skin pale with a faint shimmer, hair silver white. Her eyes were closed and her breathing was weak. She wore no clothes, only a thin metallic wrap like alien fabric. Ethan froze, his mouth dry. This can't be real," he muttered. But it was. A living girl lay inside the pod, fragile and silent. Not a toy, not an AI, but flesh and blood. Suddenly her eyelids fluttered open. Ethan gasped. Her eyes glowed faintly. 2 rings of silver. Light that seemed too deep for a child. She stared at him, confused, afraid. Her lips moved and a faint sound escaped. "K. Purr," she whispered, the word broken. Strange. Then her body trembled, and she collapsed against the side of the pod. Ethan rushed forward, not even thinking. He caught her before she could hit the floor. Her skin was warm, but faintly electric. She was so light, almost weightless in his arms. Her head rested against his shoulder. She whispered again, softer this time. "Keep her." Ethan's mind spun with 1,000 thoughts. What was this? Why was a living alien girl hidden in a product box? Had the salesman known? Why had he pushed it on him? Questions clawed at him, but right now, none mattered more than the fragile life in his arms. He carried her to the couch and laid her gently down. Her breathing was shallow. Her hands twitched as if fighting invisible pain. Ethan grabbed a blanket and covered her. The girl stirred, blinking at the fabric as though it was strange to her. She touched it, then touched Ethan's arm, as if comparing. Her voice was tiny, trembling. "Not pet," she said slowly, the words broken but clear. Ethan's stomach dropped. He had no idea how much she understood, but one thing was certain. She knew what she was not. Before he could ask anything, the pod behind them gave a sharp spark. The symbols on its surface dimmed. The purple glow collapsed into nothing. A final hiss of air escaped as the shell turned dull and lifeless. Ethan realized the pod had shut itself down. It had one purpose, to deliver her, and now it was empty. The girl reached for his hand again. Her fingers were delicate but strong. She looked into his eyes with that glowing gaze. "Keep her safe?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Ethan swallowed, nodding slowly. "Yes," he said softly, even though he wasn't sure. "I'll keep you safe." But deep inside, fear crawled through him. If this girl was real, then someone had put her in that pod. Someone had shipped her across space or across worlds, and someone might come looking. The salesman's nervous eyes returned to his mind. Had he known Ethan would open it tonight? Was this why the pod was hidden dusty, waiting under the shelf? Ethan turned off the lights and closed the curtains. He did not know who or what might be watching. The city outside was still alive with neon and noise. But in his apartment, only silence and the sound of her breathing filled the room. The girl curled closer under the blanket. Her glowing eyes slowly closed. For a moment she looked peaceful, like a child, finally finding rest. Ethan sat beside her, staring at the dead pot on the table. His hands trembled. He knew his life had just changed in ways he could not yet imagine. And as the night grew darker, he whispered to himself, "This isn't a pet. This is something else. And whatever it is, I don't think I'm ready." The next morning, sunlight slipped through the thin curtains of Ethan's apartment. He barely slept, his mind spinning with the image of the glowing-eyed girl sleeping on his couch. When he finally stood up, the first thing he did was check. If she was still there, yes, she was curled under the blanket, breathing softly, her silver hair catching the light. For a second, she looked almost human, almost normal. But Ethan knew the truth. Nothing about this was normal. He walked to the kitchen, making coffee with shaky hands. The sound of the machine filled the silence. Ethan thought about what had happened, the pod opening, the strange symbols, the girl whispering, "Keep her." It wasn't just strange, it was dangerous. If she wasn't a pet, then what was she? And why had she ended up with him? A small voice broke his thoughts. "Water." Ethan turned quickly, nearly spilling his cup. The girl was awake, sitting up on the couch. Her glowing eyes blinked slowly, her lips trembling as she repeated, "Water." Ethan hurried to her, placing a glass in her hands. She sipped clumsily, water dripping down her chin. She looked at the glass with wonder, touching it as if it was new technology. Then she looked at Ethan, tilting her head. "Keep her," she said again, more firmly this time. Ethan knelt in front of her, trying to stay calm. "My name is Ethan," he said, pointing to himself. "Ethan," the girl repeated softly, struggling with the sound. "Eth," and it startled him. She was learning fast, almost too fast. Within moments, she seemed to memorize the word. Her glowing eyes softened as she whispered again, "Ethan." Something stirred in Ethan's chest. He wasn't sure if it was fear or something else, but before he could speak, she pointed weakly at the dead pod on the table. The shell was still cracked and lifeless. Her voice trembled as she said one word, "Secret." Ethan froze. "What secret?" he asked carefully. The girl shook her head slowly, as if searching for words she didn't yet know. Her hand touched her chest, then pointed upward, toward the sky outside the window. Finally, she whispered two broken words. "War. Escape." Ethan's heart pounded. He sat down hard on the chair, staring at her. Did she mean she was running from a war? Was she some kind of refugee, smuggled here in the disguise of a product? And if that was true, who would hide her? Who would be looking for her now? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Listen. You can't tell anyone you're here." He gestured around the apartment. "This is safe. But outside, people will not understand." The girl watched him, her glowing eyes calm but sharp. She nodded slowly, repeating, "Safe." Ethan thought for a moment, then went to the closet. He found an old hoodie and handed it to her. She held it awkwardly, studying the fabric like it was alien, which for her it was, after a few tries. She pulled it over her head. The sleeves hung long past her hands, but it covered her enough to hide her strange wrap. She looked small, almost human now. Almost. The coffee machine beeped, but Ethan ignored it. Instead, he pulled out his laptop. He wanted answers. He searched the net for news about smart pets, recalls, warnings, strange stories. At first, nothing unusual appeared, just glowing reviews from happy families about cute AI animals. But then he found a hidden forum post. The words chilled him. "Warning. Some smart pet pods are not what they seem. If you get one that glows purple, do not open it. Return it immediately." Ethan leaned back in shock. Someone out there knew about this. Someone had warned the public, but the warning was buried under corporate ads and happy videos. He glanced at the girl sitting quietly on the couch. She was real proof the warning was true, and if people knew about her, it meant others might be hunting her already. The girl's voice broke the silence again. She touched Ethan's hand, her glowing eyes full of something he couldn't read. "Not pet," she repeated firmly. Her words carried more strength this time, like she wanted him to understand deeply. Ethan nodded slowly. "I know," he said, his voice quiet. "You're not a pet. You're something else?" She tilted her head, then smiled faintly for the first time. It was small, uncertain, but it made Ethan's chest tighten. He realized something important in that moment. The salesman hadn't just sold him a product. He had passed Ethan a secret that someone else wanted hidden. A secret now breathing, learning, and living in his apartment. As night fell, Ethan locked every door and window. The city outside glowed with neon. But inside his apartment, the secret was alive. And deep in his heart, Ethan knew the world outside was not ready for her. The question was, would the world come searching before he was ready to protect her? Ethan tried to live normally after that night, but nothing was normal anymore. Every morning, the alien girl, still quiet, still learning, sat on his couch and watched the world from the window. She copied words from the TV, repeating them, slowly like a child. She learned fast, too fast. Sometimes Ethan wondered if her mind was not just human smart, but something beyond. But the peace didn't last long. Strange things started happening. Small things at first. A black drone hovered outside his window one night, silent but watching. His building's security guard told him someone had been asking questions about tenants, especially people who bought smart pets. And Ethan noticed men in dark suits loitering near the store where he bought the pod. The girl seemed to sense it before he did one evening as Ethan cooked noodles in the kitchen. She stood up suddenly. Her glowing eyes sharpened, scanning the air as if hearing something he couldn't. She whispered one word that made his stomach turn. "Danger." Ethan turned off the stove, rushing to her side. "What do you mean? What danger?" he asked. She didn't answer in detail, only grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes glowed brighter as she pointed at the door. "Not safe," she whispered again, voice trembling. A knock came, sharp and heavy. Ethan froze. Nobody visited him. Ever. The knock came again, louder this time. The girl pulled him back, shaking her head violently. Ethan's chest tightened. He whispered, "Stay quiet," and crept to the door. Through the peephole, he saw two men, dark suits, plain faces, earpieces glowing faintly blue. They didn't look like delivery guys or neighbors. They looked official. Too official. One of them leaned close to the door, his voice calm but cold. "Mr. Ethan Hale, we need to ask." "You about a product you purchased?" Ethan stepped back quickly, heart racing. They knew. They knew about the pod. He turned to the girl, whispering, "We have to go." She nodded, eyes wide, clutching his arm tightly. The men knocked again, this time harder. "Open the door, sir. It's urgent." Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his bag, stuffed it with a few things, his wallet, phone, a spare jacket. He wrapped the girl in the hoodie again, pulling the hood low to cover her silver hair. Her eyes glowed faintly, but she tucked herself against him, hiding. The door shook as one of the men tried the handle. Ethan cursed under his breath. No time left. He opened the window at the back of his apartment and helped the girl climb out. The alley below was dark and wet from rain. He followed her, landing hard on his feet. They ran into the shadows just as the door upstairs cracked open. Behind them, voices shouted, "Unit 7, target may be moving. Check the alley." Ethan's blood ran cold. They weren't salesmen or police, they were hunters. The girl clung to his hand as they ran, her small legs keeping up surprisingly well. Every corner they turned, she seemed to guide him, pulling him away from the sounds of drones above. It was like she knew the safest path. They ducked into an abandoned parking garage. Ethan bent over, catching his breath. The girl's eyes glowed in the dark, sharp and alert. "They follow," she said softly. Ethan nodded, wiping sweat from his face. "Yeah, I figured that out," he whispered. Then he asked the question that had been burning since the chase began. "Who are they? Why are they after you?" The girl looked down, silent for a moment. Her hands trembled. Finally she whispered, Hunters. Want me back. Ethan's stomach dropped. Back. Back where? To her people? To a war? Or something worse? Before he could ask more, the hum of drones filled the garage. Red scanning lights swept across the walls. The girl grabbed Ethan's sleeve, pulling him deeper into the shadows. Her voice shook. Hide! Ethan pressed himself against the concrete pillars, holding her close. The red light passed dangerously. Close. One wrong move, one sound, and they'd be found. For a moment, the garage was silent except for the slow buzz of the drones. Ethan held his breath. The girl's glowing eyes dimmed slightly, almost like she was controlling them. Ethan noticed it, how the drone's red light flickered when her eyes dimmed. She was doing something beyond human. And then, the drone drifted away, turning in the opposite direction. The danger passed. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. You did that, he whispered. The girl looked at him, her voice tired but firm. Safe. For now? Ethan's hands shook as he realized the truth. This wasn't just a child, not just a refugee. She was powerful, maybe even dangerous. But she had just saved him. He tightened his grip on her hand. If she was being hunted, then he was hunted too now. And if he wanted to survive, he had no choice but to protect her. As they slipped out of the garage and back into the neon city night, Ethan knew one thing for certain. The chase had already begun, and there was no turning back. The night after the chase felt endless. Ethan and the girl hid in an old warehouse on the edge of the city. The place smelled of rust and dust, but at least it was quiet. Ethan spread out a blanket on the floor and gave her the last packet of food from his bag. She took it with small hands, studying the wrapper before carefully tasting it. Her glowing eyes softened as she chewed slowly. To Ethan, she looked less like some alien secret and more like a lost child trying to survive. He sat across from her, watching in silence. Every part of him screamed with questions. Who were the hunters? What kind of war was she talking about? And why was she given to him of all people? But when he opened his mouth to ask, she only looked at him with tired eyes and whispered, Safe. That one word held more weight than any explanation. Ethan sighed, running his hands through his messy hair. He realized she trusted him even if he didn't fully understand why, and whether he liked it or not, he was her protector now. The girl finished eating and crawled closer, sitting right beside him. She touched his sleeve, curious about the fabric, then pointed at herself. Name? Ethan asked gently. She tilted her head, thinking hard. Then she whispered, Lyra. The word was soft, musical, but clear. Lyra, Ethan repeated, nodding. She smiled faintly, as if proud she could share it. For the first time, Ethan saw her not as a burden but as someone real. Someone alive with a past, he said softly. I'm Ethan, you're Lyra. Got it, she repeated. Ethan. Lyra. Then touched her chest and whispered again. Not pet. Ethan let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. No, you're not a pet. You're something much more important. They sat together in silence, the sound of distant city sirens echoing through the warehouse walls. Lyra leaned against him, small and warm, her silver hair brushing his arm. It startled Ethan at first, but then he let her rest there. It felt right, in a way he couldn't explain. Hours passed, and the city outside grew quieter. Ethan finally spoke again, his voice low. You said, war. What war? Lyra's eyes dimmed, sadness filling. Her face, she spoke slowly, searching for the words. My people, fight hunters, take children, make soldiers. Her voice cracked as she said the last word. Soldiers. Ethan's chest tightened. She was running from something worse than he imagined. Not only was she an alien on Earth, she was an escapee from a war where even children were stolen and used. He clenched his fists, furious at whoever had done this. No one is taking you back, he said firmly. Not while I'm here. Lyra looked up at him, her glowing eyes shimmering with something he almost recognized, hope. She touched his hand gently, repeating his words, "Not back." That night, Ethan taught her simple things. He pointed at objects around the warehouse, chair, wall, lamp. Saying each word slowly, Lyra repeated, sometimes struggling, sometimes perfect. She learned fast, laughing softly when she got it right. For a moment, the warehouse didn't feel like a hiding place, it felt like a classroom, and Ethan wasn't just her keeper, he was her teacher, her friend, maybe even her only family. Later, when she grew tired, Lyra curled up on the rear blanket again. Before closing her eyes, she whispered one more word she had learned. "Thank you." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He brushed her silver hair gently, whispering, "You're welcome." As she slept, Ethan sat awake, staring at the shadows of the warehouse. He knew this bond was dangerous. The more he cared for her, the harder it would be when the hunters came again, and they would come, he was sure of it. But as he listened to her steady breathing, Ethan realized something important. He wasn't protecting her out of duty anymore. He wanted to protect her because she mattered. Lyra wasn't a machine, wasn't a pet, wasn't even just a refugee. She was a person with a name, a past, and a spark of life that glowed brighter than the neon city outside. And Ethan had already decided, no matter who came, no matter what it cost, he would not let them take her away. As the night stretched on, a faint sound of drones echoed far away. The hunters were still searching. But inside that dark warehouse, Ethan and Lyra had found something powerful. Not just safety, not just survival, but a bond strong enough to fight for, and neither of them knew it yet. That bond would soon be tested in ways neither could imagine. The warehouse had been quiet for days. Ethan and Lyra lived in shadows, sharing food, learning words, and listening to every sound outside. It almost felt safe. Almost. But deep down, Ethan knew it couldn't last. The hunters wouldn't stop. Not until they found her. One evening, as the sun dipped and the city lights flickered alive, Ethan noticed something strange. The hum of drones was louder, closer. He stepped outside the warehouse for air but froze. Across the street, 3 dark vans had parked in silence. Men in black suits moved with sharp precision. They didn't look like police. They looked like soldiers, and they were heading straight toward the warehouse. Ethan's heart dropped. He rushed back inside. "Lyra, we have to move now," he hissed. Lyra looked up from the corner where she had been practicing words with chalk on the wall. Her glowing eyes sharpened instantly. She grabbed his hand, already sensing what was coming. But they were too late. The heavy door at the front of the warehouse burst open. Armed men stormed in, weapons glowing with blue energy. A cold voice shouted, "Target confirmed. Secure the subject." Ethan pulled Lyra behind him, his body shaking. "Stay back," he shouted, though his voice cracked with fear. The men ignored him, moving forward in formation. Red laser sights cut through the dark. Locking on them, Lyra clutched Ethan's sleeve, whispering, "Run!" But Ethan knew they couldn't. Not this time. There were too many, and the exits were blocked. The first soldier lunged forward, reaching for Lyra. In that instant, something inside her snapped. Her silver eyes flared bright, brighter than Ethan had ever seen. A pulse of energy burst from her body, knocking the soldier backward like a rag doll. He slammed into the wall with a crack, his weapon skidding across the floor. The other soldiers staggered, shouting in confusion, "Contain her, don't let her power build." But it was already too late. Lyra's hands glowed with streams of silver light. The warehouse walls rattled as raw energy filled the room. Ethan stared in shock. This wasn't just a scared child. This was someone with power enough to fight back. Yet even as she defended herself, her face twisted in pain. She was too young, too weak to fully control it. Ethan grabbed a fallen pipe from the ground. He knew he couldn't match their weapons, but he wouldn't just stand by. When one soldier aimed at Lyra, Ethan swung hard, knocking the weapon aside. The shot fired, blasting a hole through the wall instead. Ethan's arms shook, but he held his ground. "Stay away from her," he shouted. The soldiers regrouped, firing in short bursts. Energy blasts lit the warehouse in blue flashes. Lyra's light shielded Ethan, bending the shots away like ripples on water. She cried out, straining, her small body trembling under the pressure, but she didn't stop. In the chaos, one soldier shouted into his comm, "Control, the subject is active, she's resisting." Another barked, "Prepare extraction." Ethan realized what they wanted, not to kill her but to take her alive. And if they succeeded, she would never be free again. Lyra fell to her knees, her glow flickering. Ethan dropped beside her, holding her shoulders. Her eyes were wide with fear, tears mixing with the glow. "I can't," she whispered. Ethan looked at her, his heart pounding. "Yes, you can," he said firmly. "You're not alone anymore. I'm here. We fight together." Something in his words reached her. Her glow steadied, stronger, clearer. She raised her hands again, light spreading through the warehouse like lightning. The soldiers staggered as their weapons shorted out, sparks flying. One by one, their visors cracked, their comms died. "Fall back," one of them shouted, panic breaking their discipline, but Lyra wasn't done. With a final burst of silver energy, she pushed them all backward in a shockwave. The men were thrown outside the warehouse, crashing into their vans. The doors slammed, shut under the force of the blast. Silence followed, broken only by the sound of Lyra's ragged breathing. The glow faded from her eyes as she collapsed into Ethan's arms. He held her tight, his chest heaving. "It's okay," he whispered, though the shaking in his voice betrayed him. "You did it, Lyra. You saved us." She looked up weakly, her voice a fragile whisper. "No. Saved. You." Ethan almost laughed through his fear, pulling her close. But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The hunters wouldn't stop. If anything, after tonight they would come harder, faster, stronger. They had seen her power, and now they would want her more than ever. As Ethan carried Lyra out of the ruined warehouse into the cold night, he looked at the neon city glowing in the distance. They had survived the first fight, but the real war was coming. And whether he was ready or not, Ethan was no longer just a keeper. He was a guardian, standing between a hunted alien girl and a world that wanted to claim her. The city night was alive with neon lights and distant sirens. Ethan carried Lyra through the dark streets, her small body weak against his chest. Every step felt heavier than the last, but he didn't stop. Behind them, the warehouse still smoked from the battle, its broken windows glowing faintly with dying sparks. The hunters had been forced back, but Ethan knew it was only for now. He ducked into a narrow alley, pressing his back against the wall. His breath came in sharp bursts. Lyra stirred weakly in his arms, her glowing eyes flickering. "You safe?" she whispered, her voice faint. Ethan tightened his grip, answering quickly, "Yes, Lyra, we're safe." But the truth pressed on his chest. They weren't. Not really. They found an abandoned stairwell and slipped inside. Ethan laid her down gently, pulling the hood of her oversized sweatshirt lower over her face. She shivered, exhausted. Ethan brushed her silver hair back and whispered, "Rest. Just rest. I'll keep watch." For the first time in his life, Ethan felt the full weight of responsibility. He wasn't just running from danger anymore. He was standing in the middle of something far bigger. He looked at her, fragile yet powerful, and realized he couldn't go back to his old life. Not after this, not after her. As she slept, Ethan's thoughts spun like storm winds. Who was she really? Why did her people send her to Earth hidden inside a product? And why did she call him Keeper? As if it was more than just a word. The questions burned in his mind, but the answers weren't his to take. Not yet. Suddenly, a faint hum echoed through the stairwell. Ethan froze, his body tense. The sound was different from drones. It was lower, deeper, vibrating through the concrete. He stepped to the window, peering outside. His blood ran cold. Above the city skyline, dark ships hovered silently, their lights blinking in strange patterns. Not police, not human, something else, something worse. He turned back to Lyra, his voice urgent. "Lyra, wake up. We have to go." Her eyes fluttered open, glowing brighter when she sensed the hum. Her face went pale, her lips trembling as she whispered a single word. Found. Ethan's stomach twisted. They're here for you, he muttered. Lyra sat up slowly, still weak, but her gaze locked on him with sharp determination. Her small hand gripped his. No, for us. Before Ethan could respond, the ground shook. Dust rained from the ceiling as the stairwell groaned under pressure. Outside, the ships shifted, releasing swarms of smaller crafts that lit up the night with red search beams. The hunters weren't just men in suits anymore. This was something bigger. They wanted her back at any cost. Ethan grabbed his bag, pulling Lyra to her feet. We can't stay here, he said, his voice firm. Lyra nodded, but there was fear in her glowing eyes. As they slipped through the stairwell and out into the maze of alleys, Ethan could hear the voices of hunters echoing closer. Target locked. Close the perimeter. They ran through the shadows, Ethan's lungs burning. Lyra stumbled but kept moving, her hand gripping his tightly. Above them, the red beams swept the streets, searching, hunting. Ethan pulled her into another alley, pressing them both against the cold wall. He whispered, I promised I'd keep you safe, and I will, no matter what. Lyra looked up at him, her glowing eyes wet with tears. For the first time, her voice was steady, not broken. Not alone, she said. Her words sent a strange strength through him. He realized she wasn't just relying on him, she was choosing to fight beside him. The ground trembled again, the hum of the ships louder now. Ethan's chest tightened. They couldn't outrun this forever. But before fear could drown him, Lyra lifted her hands. The silver glow returned, stronger than before. Not wild this time, not out of control, but focused, determined. Ethan watched in awe as her light formed a shield around them. The search beam swept the alley but slid off harmlessly. The hunters' voices rose in confusion. She's shielding. Breach it now. Lyra's face strained, but she held on. She whispered to Ethan, Run, when I say. His heart raced. No, I'm not leaving you. Her eyes blazed brighter, silencing him with a look stronger than her small frame should carry. Together, she corrected. Ethan nodded, gripping her hand tight. The red beams flared, the hum of the ships growing louder. The city seemed to shake under their hunt, but inside that glowing shield, Ethan and Lyra stood side by side, one human, one alien child, bound not by chance, but by something stronger. And in that moment, Ethan knew their story wasn't ending here. This was only the beginning. The hunters had found them, the war had reached Earth, and the fate of more than just two lives might depend on what happened next. The glow around them pulsed, brighter, sharper, the night filled with the sound of sirens, drones, and alien hums. And then, with a flash of light, the world around them changed. The story of Ethan and Lyra had only just begun.